welcome to another episode of What's Good Mzansi with me, your host, Jared Petzer. Last year, I had the privilege of listening to somebody speak. His name is Joey Evans. And for those of you who are not familiar with this guy, I mean, his talk just absolutely blew my mind, and it really spoke to the will, the human will and determination. And he's going to be joining us today, just giving us a little bit of insight about his journey, what he's been up to, what he learned from it, and perhaps we can take something away from it during this very difficult time for us. Joey, how are you doing, my friend? Are you well?
Hey, fantastic, man, and really good to be here. Thanks for the invite, buddy.
Yeah, man, it's so good to have you, bud. That talk that you gave last year was just, it was just something that was phenomenal. And ever since then, I keep seeing your name popping up in books, and you just keep on. You just constantly keep coming back to me. So I'm so glad to actually have this opportunity just to spend some time talking with you.
Awesome.
So for the guys that aren't familiar with you, which is probably not a lot of people, but for those that aren't familiar with you, can you just give us like a little bit of background in terms of Joey Evans?
Yeah, sure, man. Well, if you start at the beginning, I grew up in Kempton Park on the East Rand, and I grew up riding BMXs. I loved BMXs. I loved bicycles, and moved on to mountain bikes, and that was what I loved to do. But I always wanted to race motorbikes, man. That was my dream to ride dirt bikes and to race dirt bikes, off-road bikes. But I was in a big family. I was one of 6 children. There was no money for motorbikes and that kind of stuff. And so it actually took me until I was 26 before I bought my first motorcycle. And then I started riding dirt bikes and off-road bikes. And that's kind of how my story started, I guess.
Fantastic. Now you had one main objective, one big goal in your mind, and what was that goal? I mean, what was that one thing you were trying to achieve?
Yeah, man. I mean, for me, I started with motocross, which is like the dirt jumps and the ramps and stuff. And after motocross, I did some freestyle motocross, which is the tricks and that sort of stuff. And then I discovered off-road and enduro, and that was where I found my passion. Racing cross country through rivers and forests and dune fields, and oh man, I love that. And I'd heard about a race, and the race was called the Dakar Rally, and some guys might have heard a bit about it, but for a lot of people who haven't, what the Dakar Rally is, it's considered the toughest, most dangerous and grueling off-road race in the world. It's a 2-week race over 9,000 kilometers, crossing different countries. And I'd heard about this race, and I was just like, that's my goal, man, to go and race the Dakar Rally on my motorcycle. That's what I want to do. And so I started finding out a lot about it, and that became my big goal, to race the Dakar Rally.
Now, racing the Dakar Rally, you don't just like load your bike onto a trailer and head out to go and race the Dakar. I mean, there's a lot of process behind it and qualification stages, etc., right?
Absolutely, yeah. The way it works is they take about 150 bikers every year. And so you have to be awarded an entry. And the way it works is you have to submit a CV, a racing CV, with all the races that you've done, multiple day races. You also have to finish an international rally in the pro class. And they look at all of this, and they get all these entries up, and then they select 150 riders each year that they award entries to. It's the company that owns the Dakar is the ASO. It's the same company that owns the Tour de France. So a very similar kind of selection process. And so they'd go through these guys, and you get an entry. And then it costs you ridiculous money, because, to race 2 weeks on another continent, you need support crew, you need tires, you need, the motorcycle, you need all sorts of stuff. So it costs over R1 million, even once you've been selected. And so, I mean, I started, like telling you just now, I started with this goal in my 20s, and I saw this, and I was like, yeah, so that's what I'm going to do. And then as I started finding out all this information about qualifying, about the money, about this, I was just like, there's no ways, man. There's no ways I can do this race. This is huge. Part of the reason is I got married pretty young. I was 23 when I got married. And by the time I was 28, I had 4 daughters. So there was, for those guys out there and ladies out there that have, young families, you'll know it's all about the cost of nappies and the cost of milk and trying to pay off your car and getting your own house. And so to do a race like that at the time was just, was just impossible, you know. So I focused on other local races, but always in the back of my mind was like, one day, man, one day we're going to do that Dakar rally.
So when you talk about 150 bike riders, I mean, you're talking about 150 bike riders globally. I mean, there's only 150 people that can get on a bike and race this race out of every country in the world.
Correct. Yeah. And guys come from all over the world, you know, to come and race this race. It's, you know, all the crazy little countries and everywhere, you know. I mean, we had some of the first riders the first rider from Zimbabwe, you know, participated last year, you know, Graham Sharp, awesome guy. You know, guys from Botswana, guys from, you know, all over, just, you know, all over the world, guys go and do this race.
So, I mean, you know what they say, if a guy has a daughter, then he must have been naughty in his past life. So you must have been very naughty.
No doubt, man. The irony of all, I don't know the irony, but the crazy thing about it is my two best mates in high school also have 4 daughters each. So between the 3 of us, we have 12 daughters and no sons. So yeah, a little concerning, I think.
Well, at least you got an army of them, you know. Just hopefully they all look out for each other. All right, cool. So tell me. So I mean, you've got this vision of wanting to race the Dakar. There's all these pre-qualification steps that need to be taken in place. So what did you start doing in order to pre-qualify? You got to do a number of races or something?
Yeah, that's it. So what I started doing is I started racing all the local races. I did races as well, like the Roof of Africa in Lesotho and you know, the Botswana, the desert race. And I started, you know, building up this sort of stuff. And you know, the Dakar thing for me was just, it was this big, massive goal, but it seemed far away. But I just started, like, you know, getting into the racing, building that experience and things. And I started doing well in some of the local championships and things. And then my life completely changed. And that happened on the 13th of October, 2007. And that day I was lying second in the championship. And if I win this race, I can win this championship. But at the time, just seemed like the most important thing in my life. And I lined up at the start of this race in Heidelberg, just south of Joburg, on that Saturday morning, just like any other, waiting for that start flag to drop. And that was the last thing that I remembered. And the next thing I remembered was waking up, lying in the dirt. My helmet was off, and there's just people looking down at me. And I'd been unconscious because what had happened was, going into that first corner of the race, there'd been a big pileup of bikes and a big crash. And in the dust and the mayhem, other riders had ridden over me as well. And as I came around, I just thought, man, my mouth is so full of dirt and stones. And I started spitting out this dirt and stones, but it wasn't dirt and stones, it was my teeth. And what I'd done is I'd shattered 12 of my teeth down into the gums. But that wasn't the worst injury, because as I lay there with my legs bent, they were leaning against a mate of mine. And as they stood back, my legs just fell to the ground. And I just said to the medics, I said, you know, I can't feel my legs. There's nothing there. And that sparked, you know, a lot of things that day. And there was a lot of complications. And I ended up lying there in the dirt for about 3 hours, and then transported to 3 different hospitals over the next 48 hours, and landed up at the Mealmed spinal unit in Pretoria. And that was where I learned the extent of my injuries. And what I'd done is I'd broken my back. I'd broken my T8 and T9 vertebra in my back and crushed my spinal cord. And so I was paralyzed from the chest down. And they said that I probably wouldn't walk again. And that's how it would be the rest of my life. And so every dream, every goal, everything I wanted to do with my life suddenly just felt like it evaporated. Everything was gone. It suddenly, all these plans, all these things, you know, things I want to do with my business, things I want to do with my family, you know, my Dakar goal, all of it just gone and just disappeared. And suddenly every day just became a struggle to keep it together, not only physically, but mentally as well.
That is insane. I mean, you know, people go through challenges in life, and you think to yourself, like, we've got the worst of it. But then, you know, you have a conversation with somebody like you, and all of a sudden you go from being a healthy person with the full use of their legs, and this wonderful opportunity in this life to progress forward, and all these ambitions and all these dreams, and then boom, just like that, it's gone. Tell us, I mean, how did you handle that mentally? I mean, how did you start moving forward from that, Joey?
Yeah, you know, at first it was really difficult, you know, because who you are in your mind doesn't match your body. You know, with an injury like this, you lose all feeling, all movement, everything from the injury down. So mine was from just below my chest. So I couldn't even roll over in bed. I couldn't, obviously, there was no movement in my legs, and my legs just started to get skinnier and skinnier as the muscle atrophied. And along with an injury like this, you lose all bowel control. You lose all bladder control. You lose your ability to digest food properly. You lose your ability to sweat. So there's a lot of extra complications that come along with this. And you can imagine in my mind, I'm this guy who's a fit guy. I've run marathons and ultra marathons. I've raced these dirt bikes. I feel like I'm a strong, sporty individual. And suddenly I'm in a wheelchair. I'm missing half of my teeth. I'm wearing nappies, and I've got a bag of urine strapped to my calf. And the reality of this just kind of really is difficult, because people treat you different. People stare at you everywhere you go. And so who you are inside your mind and how you appear and who you are physically is just completely changed. And it was very humbling and very difficult to kind of come to terms with those sort of stuff. And so there was a lot of times that it just weighed heavy on me. And I'm a pretty positive guy, you know, and I thought about all of this and kind of took it all in. And to be honest, there's really two choices you get to make. You either get to check out, where you just end it all and you're done, or you decide to live, but not just stay alive, but to live. And in order to decide to live, you have to decide that you are going to still chase your dreams, and you're still going to chase your goals. And in spite of these physical challenges, that you're going to still just keep going. And I have an incredible wife, Meredith, who is incredibly supportive for me. And obviously I have my four, you know, beautiful daughters, and lying in that hospital, I decided I'm going to live. I'm going to still chase my dreams. I'm still going to chase my goals. I'm not going to let this stand in the way of me living my full life. And so that was the decision I made, to live. And it would be easy to tell you that every day I was like this machine, and I worked hard, and I was super positive and stuff. And I mean, there were days like that, but it wasn't always like that. There were times that I would still lie in that hospital bed at night on my own in the dark and just cry. It was so difficult to face the same challenge every day again and again. But I'd get up the next morning and I'd go again. And along with all of these goals and dreams, I thought about that Dakar goal of mine. And I thought, you know what? I'm still going to do the Dakar rally, man. That is a goal that I'm still going to do one day. I don't know how we're going to do it. We're going to figure it out as we go along, but that's what's going to happen. And every day was hard to push through, like I said, but I would break it up. And so I couldn't face the rest of my life. It was just too big a, scarier thing to think about, you know, living my whole life, you know, like this. But I could do tomorrow. And sometimes if I couldn't just do tomorrow, I could do until lunchtime, or I could do to the end of this physio session. And I just break it up into those bite-sized bits. And so sometimes it would just be a case of I'd say, right, we're going to go till lunchtime. And then it's okay, we're going to go until the late afternoon. And we just keep pushing on. And suddenly we got through a day. And then we got through a week. And then we got through a month. And so we carried on like that. And so it was just breaking it up, which was really the biggest coping mechanism that worked for me.
So the doctors have said, that's it, man, you're not going to walk again, you're done. And in your mind, you made a decision to say, I don't accept that, and that I'm going to push forward. And obviously you go through these struggles. What was the process there to actually to start moving forward from there? I mean, just take us through that for a while.
Sure, yeah. You know, when you have a spinal cord injury, sometimes there's two kind of types. So you basically get a complete, where it's destroyed and pretty much everything from there down is all lost. And with the way we have our current, where we are currently in medical advances, that's a kind of a done deal as we are right now. And then you have what's called an incomplete, where you'll damage your spinal cord and you can start off complete like I was, where you have nothing. But then you sometimes get a little bit back. Sometimes, you know, depending on where your injury is, you could have a little bit here, or a little bit there, or a little bit of feeling, or a little bit of movement, you know, a limited amount. And what happened with me is I started to get a little flicker in my right big toe. If I really focused,
wiggle your big toe. It's like something out of a Pulp Fiction movie.
Exactly. So I could just make this like this big toe just flicker just a little bit like this, and this gave us some sort of hope and things. And you know, the doctors fused my back at T8, T9, so they put in the screws and that sort of stuff. And I came out of the operation, and that flicker in my toe was gone. And the next day it still wasn't there, and the next day it wasn't there, and then it started to come back, and then I got a little bit of movement in my left ankle. And as the days and weeks and months where it carried on, I started to get a little bit of feeling in my right quad, a little bit of, you know, more strength. And slowly but slowly, it started to get just a little bit better and a little bit better. And I started to learn to stand with braces on my legs in between parallel bars. And we went on from that to stand without braces. And then we started to walk with crutches, and little bit by little bit, just this progress. But that next year, 2008, was, man, that was by far the most difficult year of my life. You know, to struggle with these things, you know, along with all these other complications, you know, that you have. And so I just kept working through and working through and working through, and then started to learn to walk again, you know, unaided, and continue to progress.
So how important are these little victories? Because so we've got these very small victories. Wiggle your big toe. There must be some level of victory in that. And how important is it for us to own those small little victories? You know, even though you're not achieving your full goal, surely these little incrementals. I mean, wiggle your big toe, then you've got movement in your ankle. I mean, these must have been like paramount moments for you, each one of them, right?
Massive. And I can't even like, you know, tell you how massive, but it's all about perspective. You know, I'm lying there in hospital, paralyzed, and my big toe wiggles. Now I've got two choices. I can either be like, great, I don't have 99% of everything I need, but I got a freaking, you know, little wiggling toe, you know, and have a big whine about it. Or I can be like, yesterday I had nothing, and today my toe wiggled. And suddenly when you see it in that way, it changes everything. And if I compare myself to how I was before the accident, it's a miserable situation. But if I look at where I was 2 days ago or 3 days ago and where I am now, it is incredible, and it's freaking cool, man. And so you gotta look at for those positive nuggets, you know, and then you take that and you go like, great. And then that toe turned into an ankle that moved, and suddenly we're on this like awesome track heading back out of this thing, you know.
Just, that's incredible. All right, cool. So now we're starting to walk again. We aided with crutches, and we slowly but surely back on our feet, literally, figuratively. So tell us about the next phase of this journey for you.
Well, the next phase was a little bit by accident. You know, it was 2.5 years after breaking my back, and I'm walking again. I still can't run and jump, and my legs are still weak and that sort of stuff, but I can walk. And we're pulling up to a picnic the one day with my family, and across the road in the veld is my buddy, and he's got a bike over there with a mate of his. And I walk over to them, we start chatting a bit, and then he goes, "Hey Joey, you want to give it a go?" And I'm like, "Yeah, let's do this, man." And so they had to help me on. You know, the dirt bikes are pretty tall, and they got me on this bike, and I pulled out the Kickstarter, and I got my foot up to start this bike, and I just fell over with the bike still between my legs. And you know what your mates are like. They had a good laugh at me, and eventually they picked me up, got me back on this bike, and they started it. And I rode this bike around this flat piece of veld. But not being able to run or jump or do the things I used to be able to do, to be able to just twist that throttle and just move effortlessly was just so incredible. And all I'm thinking about is the Dakar Rally. Man, we could do this, you know? And so I went back to my physiotherapist, and I said, Shanae, I need you to teach me to get back, you know, get on a bike on my own. And so she made these little equipment in the Virgin Active gym where her rooms were, and she piled up these little boxes, and I started to learn to get on and off these boxes. And it was a silly little exercise where, you know, the big buff folks pumping weights are laughing at me. And slowly but surely we started to get a little bit fitter, a little bit stronger. And then I bought a second-hand motorcycle. I got the suspension lowered. I cut the foam out of the seat so I could get my feet down on the ground. And I started to ride again. And now to be able to ride and go up in the mountains with my mates and be in the sunshine and just going all the beautiful places that we have in South Africa was just incredible, man. It was incredible for my mind. It was incredible for my body to be out there. And then we started that next chapter.
So there must be something to that. I mean, you know, if we look at people that have been incarcerated, for example, you know, you have your freedom and then your freedom gets taken away and then you get your freedom back again. I mean, how does that taste? What does that taste like? Because it's, you know, I think even though you're enjoying your life and it's not like you're not enjoying your life, but to have something that you enjoy taken away from you and then given back, just explain to us what that feels like, Joey.
Oh man, it was truly incredible, and you suddenly see the world through different eyes. You know, and I mean, obviously we all know where we are right now. It's you know, you talk about incarceration. All of us right now in our minds are relating it to how it feels right now, and we're sitting here in our homes going like, man, remember that time we did that beach holiday, and remember that time we rode our mountain bikes, you know, up in the cradle, or we, you know, got to, you know, go and surf or kite surf or whatever it is that you do, you know, and you think of those times and you're like, man, I really miss that, you know. And so it was to come out again and to have these abilities, you know, I never fully recovered, but to have abilities way more than it was when I was in the hospital, you just appreciate it so much more, just so much more. You know, and suddenly you see everything different, and you realize how fantastic it is to have a body that works. You know, I remember being in that hospital, and when I was in that hospital, I promise you, I couldn't care less about money. I couldn't care less about worldly goods and all that. Suddenly it just all evaporated and it meant nothing. I would trade everything I've ever had to have good health again. And so you appreciate something so much more when you're without it. And I hope that's how it is when we get over this really difficult time, however long this lasts, you know, with lockdowns or somewhere in between, which is probably the way it's headed. I hope when we get to the point where we can do cool stuff outdoors and stuff, that we do cool stuff, and we take our kids out and we travel and we do some really nice stuff around our beautiful country.
Yeah, yeah. Joey, so this next chapter, mate, what is the next chapter? Tell us what goes on from there.
Okay, so now we bought the second-hand bike and we start riding again. Now, we spoke earlier about the qualifications to get to this race. So I'm in this situation where this is my goal. This is what I want to do. But in order to get to this race, I've got to qualify. And in order to qualify, I've got to start racing again. And so it was 3.5 years after breaking my back. And suddenly I'm on that start line of a race again, up at Hardy Beersport Dam, waiting for that flag to drop. And all these memories are in my mind, and I feel like I'm going to vomit on that start line. I'm so nervous. But that flag drops, and out of instinct, I just go for it. And we start racing, and we go up into the rocky koppies. But as it starts getting more and more difficult, you got to use your feet a lot more, and I struggle. And so I just start falling further and further back, and I end up stone lost. And it's man, it's humbling. You know, I used to be this guy who could win these kind of races or podium them. I was chasing championships, and now I'm this hacker at the back of the race that just sucks. And I keep dropping the bike over and trying to pick it up, and you know, guys are getting frustrated and they're passing me. And you know, the format that day was we had 3 hours to do as many laps as we could. So it wasn't long before guys started to lap me, and they lapped me again and again. And some guys lapped me 6 times, and I'm like, I'm not this guy. This is crazy. But it was one of those days where I learned big lessons, you know, and I learned that, you know, I'm not the same guy I used to be. I'm different now. I'm not racing these guys anymore. I'm now racing myself. I'm now racing my injury. And every 10 meters that I keep going, I'm winning. You know, I might be stone lost, but I'm winning if I keep going. And I pushed through, and you know, the time ran out, and I still hadn't finished one lap, but I kept going until I finished that one lap. And I was obviously time barred, but when I crossed that finish line, I revved that bike on the limiter, just one, and I punched the air. And you know, the guys in the pits are looking over at me going like, does he know he's lost? But you know, that was a big win for me. And then after that, I started to do other races, and then I got time barred again and again. But then I started to finish races, and then I stepped it up and I started doing multiple day races. And I slowly built the CV little bit by little bit by little bit. And to cut a long story short, it was 9 years after breaking my back. And I built up this CV to the point where I needed one last thing on my CV, and that was an international rally in the pro class. That was the last thing I needed on the CV. And there was a race in Morocco. And so we took all our savings as a family, and I bought a place on a French team, and I went over to Morocco to go and compete in the Mazuga Rally. And it was a 7-day race through Morocco, through the Sahara Desert and these dunes and these incredible places. And there was so much I could tell you about the race, but the important thing was that I finished. And after 7 days, I finished that race. I came home, I filled out this racing CV, and I sent it into the ASO to ask for an entry to Dakar. And I waited. And it took 6 weeks. And after 6 weeks, I got an email, and I opened up the email, and it said, "Congratulations, you've been accepted to race the Dakar Rally in 2017. And whoa, man, when I read that, I was just like, whoosh, I was so pumped. But at the same time, I'm like, oh man, what have I done? Now I've got to go and do this race. And so then it just, then we started the next chapter.
So, I mean, so you've gone through this process, 9 years of trying to complete this objective just to get you to your end goal. And now this thing is actually upon you. And now you've got to somehow find $1 million. Tell us about that journey.
That was exactly it, you know. I suddenly got this entry in my hand, but I got a bit of money. We just spent all our life savings to go to Morocco to qualify. And so I look at this and I go like, you know what? It's taken me 9 years to get this entry in my hand. I'm not about to let a silly little thing like money stand in the way now. And so I sat down with my wife, Meredith, and my girls, and we said, right, we've got 6 months to the start of this race, and we need to raise 1.1 million rand. And so we just brainstormed, and we just did anything we could think of, man. We did adventure bike rides. We did big enduro bike events where my wife and her sister did the entries. My daughter sold cold drinks and hot dogs, and my buddies helped me to mark the trails in the veld. And you know, we had so many people just rally around us as a family and as an individual, where they helped guys. Oh man, the amount of support I had from friends and family, and from people in the motorcycle community. You know, guys who ride bikes. You know, they're like, there's like this big band of brothers, and everyone's on different bikes and doing different stuff, but the guys have got your back. And I had so much support from guys, and we just slowly ticked away. We did all these kind of things. We sold caps, we sold t-shirts. We were ready to start selling heroin if we had to. No, I'm just kidding. we never did any of that, but it was tempting. But we did almost anything we could think of. Yeah. And it was just, the other thing we said, anybody who donates, we don't care if it is 10 Rand or 10,000 Rand, we'll put your name on the motorcycle. And we had more than 320 names on that bike. And it was just, 3 or 4 days before the start of that race. And we hit our goal of 1.1 million Rand in 6 months. And so on the 2nd of January 2017, I stood on the start line of the Dakar Rally in Asunción, Paraguay, South America.
Unbelievable, man. So listen, I mean, it's just so inspiring to hear, because now all of a sudden your dream, your journey becomes the dream and the journey of so many people. In fact, every single person that contributed in any way, financial or from a support standpoint, you just inspired so many people. Tell me, your family, I mean, your wife and your daughters, I mean, surely there must have been a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety from them out of this whole thing.
Absolutely. For a lot of people watching this, they're going to look at this and say, okay, cool. So this guy was racing motorcycles, he got paralyzed, and then his goal was to do the most dangerous, longest off-road race in the world. And he's married and he's got kids. Why is this guy not on medication? It's, and I get that. I get that 100%. But at the same time, riding motorcycles is my passion, man. It makes me feel alive. It is something that I love. It is something that is just so good for my soul and for my mind. And Meredith, my wife, she doesn't share that same passion for riding motorcycles, but she loves me, and she understands me, and she can see what this does for me and what this does for my life and for my mind and for my soul and things. And so she supports that 100%. And is it scary? Yeah, man, it is it is incredibly scary for her because she also has to sit at home and watch it on the computer and track me going through these races and stuff. And so it is, but she has been incredible in supporting me along with my daughters as well. And so they were, as scary as it was, they were my biggest fans, you know, and they would support me all the way with this.
Crazy. Okay, so let's get back to the starting line. You're in Dakar at the starting line. I mean, it's not just bikes that enter this thing, right? I mean, it's cars, it's trucks, it's bikes. I mean, this is no joke. This is quite a serious race.
You know, when you race motorcycles here in South Africa and pretty much anywhere in the world, you race against other motorcycles. Every now and again, they might have a race where you race against quad bikes as well, but it's unusual. It's normally just motorbikes. But at Dakar, it is motorbikes, it is quad bikes, it is those side-by-side, you know, vehicles, it is cars, and it is trucks. And these trucks are these 8-ton massive things that are faster than most of the bikes. It's crazy and it's nuts. And suddenly you're standing on the start line with all these kind of vehicles, and you're like, man, this is crazy. And guys warned me about the trucks and things. And the first time one of those trucks passed me, man, I promise you, it is the scariest thing of your life. It's just ridiculous. But yeah, we just it was the race was 13 days long that year, 9,000 kilometers. And off we went, you know. But I got to tell you, at this point, I still have a lot of physical challenges. So even though it's 10 years post injury and stuff, I still can't run. I can't jump. I can't feel hot or cold or pain sensation below my chest. I can't sweat below my chest. So it's very difficult to regulate my body temperature, especially in the deserts and that kind of stuff. And, you know, to put it all out there, I still have to use catheters every day. And so to suddenly be on the start line of the Dakar Rally with all these additional challenges, you know, as a rookie, generally rookies, so in other words, your first time racing, you have about a 30% chance of finishing. So I've got a 30% chance of finishing, plus I've got all these physical challenges. I mean, my chances of finishing this race they're next to nothing. You know, a betting man would have said I'm wasting my time being there, you know.
Just phenomenal, Joey. Just phenomenal, man. All right, so tell us, how does this race kick off? I mean, so I mean, you just jump on, 13 days later you finish. Is it as easy as that? Tell us about some of the details of the actual race itself.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, you know, the race is worked in stages. So every day you have to cover a certain distance. So they have a place where you start and a place where you end, and you average about 800 kilometers a day. You know, mostly off road. And so, you know, some of the top guys will ride for 10, you know, maybe 12 hours a day. But a guy like me, I'm racing for 16, 18 hours a day. There were several days where I raced for over 20 hours. And so it just starts to snowball, because on the first day, you're fresh, you're strong, you get through that first day, but you're tired and you're broken, and then you have your 4 or 6 hours sleep, and then you do it all again. And then you have your 4 or 6 hours sleep, and then you do it all again. And it starts to just add up and add up and add up. And the tighter you are, the more mistakes you make. And so you have these little crashes, and you have, you know, you make navigation errors, because you have to navigate all of this as well with a road book of instructions and cap headings, which is a numerical compass direction. And, you know, there's a lot of that as well. So it's also working out your routes and that sort of stuff. And so by the end of day 3, I was so physically and mentally exhausted. You know, I felt like I thought I would feel at the end of the race. I mean, my eyes are bloodshot. I'm tired. Every muscle in my body aches. My lips are split. My face is sunburnt. Everywhere that, you know, the strap from your helmet is chafing you raw. From your elbow guards, your chest guards, you got blisters on your hands. You're just destroyed. I mean, you imagine doing any kind of endurance racing. By the end of day 3, you know, you're just destroyed. And I'm looking at this going like, what am I doing here, man? I don't belong here. There's no ways I'm going to be able to finish 13 days. I should just quit. This is crazy. You know, I shouldn't be here. And those trucks come past you, and you see the dangers and stuff. And it's just, man, it was, by the end of day 3, I was like, man, this is crazy. This is just nuts.
So 9.5 years just to beat yourself up.
Exactly. You know, to give you an idea, at that point, only 9 South Africans had ever finished the Dakar Rally on a motorcycle in 39 years of the race. And that year there was 3 of us there. And the next day, that day 4, was by far the most toughest day of the rally. There was 18 riders that all went out that day. And it was a high altitude dune section where the sand was really soft. So it was really difficult to ride a motorcycle in that type of stuff. Your bike would keep sinking in the sand. You'd be digging it out and dragging it out. You'd get 10 meters and then you'd go. And you've got literally, a couple 100 kilometers of this. And it was just brutal. And a lot of guys went out that day. And sadly, along with those guys was my teammate, Walter de Blanche from Cape Town. He had some engine challenges and he was forced to withdraw that day as well. And so from the 3 of us that started, there's only 2 of us now left in the race. And then we went over into day 5, and day 5, we crossed through the Andes Mountains, high altitude, switchback tracks, and it was raining, and then it was snowing, and then it was hailing, and all these tracks had turned to mud. And I came around this one corner, and there was like a dip in the track. And I go through this dip, and as I exit out the dip, I look up, and I see a bike lying there. And I recognize the bike, and it's the other South African teammate, David Thomas. And what had happened was David had a massive high-speed crash, and I looked around for Dave, and I saw him lying there in the mud. And I stopped, and I waited with him, and it turned out that he'd broken his leg in 9 places. And I helped to load him into that medical chopper, and he was medevaced out. And so by the end of day 5, I'm the last South African left in this race. And I couldn't face the rest of the time. I was so broken. And so I took the same strategy that I did back in that hospital, where I didn't look at the whole race. I just looked at the next day. And if that was too much, I just looked at the next 100 kilometers. And sometimes the next 100 kilometers, the next 10 kilometers. And sometimes I broke it up to the next 10 meters. In some of those dune fields, I'm going to go to that next dune. And I'd just get to that next dune, and I'd stop on top of that next dune, and I'd turn off my bike, and I'd rest, and I'd let the motor cool down and breathe. And then I'd pick another dune, sometimes little dunettes just 10 meters away, and I'd just get to that one, and I'd get to the next one. And if I broke it up like that, suddenly all those little 10 meters was 100 meters. And then it became a kilometer, and then it became 100 kilometers. And suddenly I've got through another day, and then I'd go again, and I'd go again. And I just hacked my way through this race. I'm not a top racer. I was lying at the back of the field every day. Several days I finished stone last, just hacking my way through this race, through my race. And out of those 13 days, I got all the way to day 12. And day 12 of the 2017 Dakar Rally is a day that I'll just remember my whole life.
So, this must be quite daunting for you. You've got all these physical challenges. There's only a 30% chance of finishing this race. Two of your compatriots are 100% healthy. They're both out of this thing. You must be thinking to yourself now, like, what the hell have I actually gotten myself into here? Joey, I know that you said you broke it up into steps, but just like, what is going through your mind at this point? Are you still 100% confident in your ability to be able to finish, or are you literally just trying to take it as it comes?
Man, in my heart, I believe I can finish this. Man, I believe it so much. I'm like, yes, I can. But then you face this stuff and you're like, okay, maybe I can't. You know what I mean? And you start there's self-doubt talk starts coming into your mind and into where you're at. If we relate it to where we are today, and with guys being in lockdown and dealing with this virus and things, we all started out, and for many of us, we looked at those 3 weeks and we were like, our companies won't survive. We can't do this, or I can't go without my salary. I can't. And it was all like, but deep down in our hearts, we say, okay, we'll get through this. It's going to be a big challenge, but we're going to get through this. And then the goalposts are moved, and suddenly it's 5 weeks. And then suddenly it's like, okay, at the end of 5 weeks, it's not going to go back to normal like this. There's going to be other challenges. And so even though we start off believing, yeah, we can fully do it, these things happen. And it's almost like this reality just gets kind of piled on you. And you start to go like, man, I just don't know. I just don't know if we can. You want to believe and you want it, but all that self-doubt starts creeping in. And that's really how it was during this race. And so for that advice, that I applied in that race applies the same now, where you look at it and you go, okay, we don't know how all this is going to play out. You know, no one does. We've all looked at the news. We've all looked at stuff. We don't know how it's going to play out, but we can do something today. You know, instead of just saying, well, I hope it works out, you can look at it today and say, right, what are the things I can do to think out of the box, to change my business? What are the things I can do to improve myself for when it does get out, that I'm in a better position? I'm in a better position mentally. I'm in a better position physically. I've grown relationships with my family, my kids. How can I use this time? And you just take it just today. What are you going to do today to change it? What are you going to do? And if you can't handle the whole day, what are you going to do for the next hour? And you break it up like that. And I promise you that you do that, those hours become days, and those days become weeks. And suddenly you find yourself finishing this thing that you need to do. And you're in a place where you're a lot better for it.
So it's day 12. You say this is a day like no other, a day that you'll never forget. What is so significant about day 12?
Man, you know, you start in the order you finished the day before. So I'd finished stone last the day before. So day 12, I'm starting stone last in the bike category. Now they send all the bikes, then they send all the cars, and then they send all the trucks. But the cars and trucks are a lot faster than the bike for the majority of the bikers. And so they've created a system that in every car and truck, there's a button, and on every bike, there's an alarm. And what happens is if the guy in the car or the truck sees a biker in the distance, he presses this button and it sends off this alarm on the guy's bike. And so as a biker, you're riding along and suddenly your alarm will go off, just like this. And you turn around and you see this car or truck, normally about 200 or 300 meters back behind you. And you pull over on the side of the track, or you pick a spot where you can pull over, you stop. And, you know, within 10 or 15 seconds, this car or truck just comes past you, just whoa, and covers you in dust and kicks out stones and rocks out the back, and you're invisible in this dust cloud. That's why it's so important you're off the track, because sometimes there's 2 or 3 cars and you wait for the track to clear, and then you get back in that track and whomp, and off you go racing again. And this had obviously happened to me, you know, many times over Dakar. But on that day 12, we're in a section where there's 2 parallel tracks, you know, like a Jeep track, a little 2-spur track winding through this semi-arid environment. And the middle Manaki is very steep, so you can't ride on the middle Manaki, and you can't ride outside of the track because there's a bit of vegetation. And over the years, those tracks have got deeper and deeper. So it's like 2 parallel ruts, but these ruts are filled with fish, which is like this really fine, like dirt, like talcum powder. So as a biker, you can hardly see this. And so you're riding along, you just have to pick a rut and ride in this rut. And so we can do 50 or 60 Ks an hour, but those guys in the cars and trucks with 4 wheels, they can do like 120, 140 kilometers an hour coming through the section. And I'm riding along this left-hand rut, lying stone last, and my alarm goes off. And I turn around expecting to see this car a couple 100 meters back, but he's like 30 meters back. He's doing more than double my speed. And he's expecting me just to swerve off into the bush. And I see this guy and I turn my bars just to swerve off into the bush. But right where I am in that rut, that front wheel just drags against the inside of that rut. And I'm unable to climb out. And this guy's right on me. And I just dive off this bike. And I just hear crunch. And this guy crashes straight into my bike and completely rides over my bike. And my bike is just destroyed. And I hear this. And I'm lying on the ground. I turn around. This guy's missed me by centimeters, and the dust is clearing. And I just see this bike completely destroyed. And the guy stopped, you know, about 30 meters up. And the navigator stood out the car, and he goes like this. And I'm like, no, man. Along with some other words and stuff. The guy he just got back in that car, and off you went. And I couldn't believe it, you know, after 10 years from breaking my back to get to the start of that race, all the sacrifices, all the financial expense, all the challenges for those races and stuff to get to that point. And on the second last day, and I'm out of this race, and I cannot even tell you what that felt like. And I dragged that bike out of that track, and I stood it up, and the petrol tanks are destroyed, all the bars are bent, the frame is bent, all the navigation equipment is broken off and back into the bars, the foot peg is shed off, the exhaust is flattened. It's just destroyed. And I thought about Meredith you know, back here in South Africa, tracking me on this thing. And I thought, you know, she's going to be so worried. She's going to see me on the computer that I'm stationary, that I'm not hitting another waypoint. And as time goes on, she's going to get more and more worried. I've got to tell her I'm out of this race. And I carry a sat phone, and I pulled out my satellite phone, and I phoned her up, and I told her, hey, you know, I'm not injured, but I'm out of this race. And, you know, she just cried. And, you know, we stood there together, just thousands of kilometers apart, just, you know, trying to come to terms with this just cruel turn of fate is how it felt. And I hung up that phone, and I looked at this bike, and I thought, you know, the way it works at Dakar is that there's no cutoff time that day. Even if it gets dark, you're allowed to still race. The only rule is you have to be on the start line for your start time the next morning. And only when you miss that start time are you actually out of the race. And I decided, well, I'm just going to keep going. I don't care. I'm going to try to fix this bike. If I can't, I'm going to push this bike, but I'm not going to quit before 4 o'clock tomorrow morning. And at that point, I'll be out of this race. But I'm not going to, because we have a little button on the bike. You can press this button, and they'll send a chopper, and they come and pick you up, and you're out the race. And by this point, it's like 10 o'clock in the morning. But I said, I'm going to keep going until 4 o'clock tomorrow morning. At that point, I had 660 kilometers still to race that day. You know, it's not going to happen. It's impossible. But I'm not going to quit. I'm going to be time barred if I go out of this race. And so what I started to do is I started to try and fix this bike. And I disconnected the petrol tanks that were damaged, because there's 3 petrol tanks on the bike. 2 of them were destroyed. I took the whole exhaust pipe off the bike. I disconnected all the wiring that was destroyed, because I was so worried it was going to spark, because that bike was full of fuel. I didn't want to have a little impromptu braai in the middle of South America. And I started to just try to get this bike working. And it took me, you know, over an hour, but eventually I got the bike working with just a couple liters of fuel on this bent frame with bent bars, with no navigation equipment, with no foot peg, with no exhaust. And I couldn't ride in that track anymore, because there was more cars and trucks coming now and things. And so I just zigzagged through the bush, just keeping the track in sight to my left. And I just kept zigzagging along. And the time just kept running out. And I'm wasting my time. There's no ways. I'm running out of fuel. I'm going to be out of fuel within 20 kilometers. And the next place I hit civilization is 65 kilometers away. There's no other bikers behind me. I'm wasting my time. I'm out of this race. The speed I'm going, it's going to take me 2 weeks to finish the stage. So it's just foolish. It's just silly. But I made that decision that I wasn't going to quit, that I would only be time barred if I got out of this race. And so I just zigzagged along, and man, I can't even tell you what it feels like to keep going when you know you're out. You know you're wasting your time, but you're kind of plodding along, but there's almost no hope. And then the most incredible thing happened. And I'm riding along, and suddenly in the middle of the semi-arid desert is a bike just standing there on its own, a KTM 450 rally replica, exactly the same bike as mine, just standing there in the middle of this desert. And what had happened was the guy had crashed, and he'd broken both his arms, and he'd been medevaced out in the chopper. And so his bike stays there until the sweeper truck at the back of the race picks up this bike. But now the rules of Dakar is that I can't ride that bike, but I can use parts from that bike. And as you remember, I told you I grew up in Kempton. So I decided this is what we're going to do. And I had there was 3 Argentinian guys there, just on old dirt bikes, spectating the race in the middle of nowhere. And they helped me, and we stripped the exhaust off that bike, and we siphoned the petrol out of that bike, and we took the whole side of the frame with a foot peg and the brake and stuff that I needed, and we put it onto my bike. And it took us so much time. You know, at this point, I was 4 hours behind the next biker, you know, who was second last. So I'm 4 hours behind the guy who's second last. And I've still got to try to make it in by 4 a.m. And so I needed more stuff. I needed all the navigation equipment, but it's going to take hours to try and strip and change that all over. So I had to go. And so I just started riding. And I rode the rest of that day alone through South America. And then it started to get dark. And I rode through forests that night on my own. I crossed mountain passes. I went through rivers in the dark. And man, when you cross rivers in South America in the dark, it is on your own. It's in the middle of the night. It's pretty damn scary. And I just kept ticking away and ticking away and ticking away. And it was 10 o'clock at night, 11, 12, 1, 2 in the morning. And at 2:15, I got to that second last bivouac of the Dakar. And at the gate of the bivouac is Walter de Blanche, my teammate from Cape Town. He's waiting for me. He was the guy who went out on day 4 with the seized motor. And he's waiting for me at 2:15 in the morning. And he climbed on the back of the bike, and we rode into those pits together, and we got up to our team truck, and my mechanic's waiting up for me. And along with my mechanic is the Red Bull TV crew. And they filmed it coming in. I mean, Red Bull TV they film, you know, all these top riders and stuff. They don't film the hackers at the back like me. And but there they were, and we, you know, and I ended up having 1 hour of sleep that night, and then the next day I rode another 850 or 750 kilometers the next day into Buenos Aires and managed to finish the Dakar Rally.
Unflippin' believable, man. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. What is that like for you, Joey? That feeling of going through this immense hardship and immense pain and immense challenge, and at the end of it, 10 years later, you've achieved your goal. I mean, what does that feel like, man?
Oh man, can I tell you, it was really incredible. And the thing for me was, it wasn't so much crossing that finish line. For me, it was coming home. You know, when I got back to OR Tambo and I came through those doors, and Meredith is there, and my girls are there, and all these friends and people that helped support me, these guys who had you know, come to my fundraising events, the guys who had put their names on my bike, you know, just, it was just incredible, you know. And I got to tell you here, you know, as you get to the end of this, that there was someone at the airport that said to me, they said, "Man, Joey, you are so lucky to have such a cool story." And
wow.
I thought about that, and I've thought about it a lot since. And I thought, you know what? No one ever told me that I was lucky when I was lying in that hospital bed, you know, 10 years before. But that was just chapter 1 of this really cool story, you know. And so for the guys out there that are going through some really tough times, because it's tough right now, it's tough on families, it's tough financially, it's tough for businesses, big businesses, small businesses, individuals. You know, a lot of us right now we're just sitting in this chapter 1, and we get to decide how the story ends. And so you can end your chapter in chapter 1, and it can be a tragedy, or you can just keep going. You break it up, you go day by day, you go hour by hour, and you just work through the stuff. And at the end of the day, you know, people are going to look at you and go like, "Man, you're so lucky to have a really cool story."
Amazing, Joey. Ladies and gentlemen, Joey Evans. If you want to get any more information about him, just take a look at the top of this video. You'll see there's links to his site and his pages and his books. And if you want to book him, I'm sure you can get hold of him through any one of those channels. Joey, thank you so much, my friend, for spending time with us. This is just the most remarkable story. I think it's something that people really need to hear right now, man.
Oh man, I really appreciate that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you a link as well. So what I've decided to do for this period of lockdown, I've written a book about my whole journey. You know, what we've touched on today is really just tip of the iceberg. But I've made the audiobook free, so guys can download the audiobook for free, and they can listen to the whole story during this lockdown period. And you know, you can listen to it together with your families, and I hope it helps to keep you going through, and I hope you enjoy it.
My friend, thank you so much. This is probably one of the best interviews that I've had. And again, I just want to thank you very much, and thank you for sharing your story with us.
Oh, fantastic, buddy. And one last thing.
Yeah.
We live in a freaking awesome country. And as a biker, I've seen all these places in the Northern Cape and on the coast, and just, I've got to go to so many places. So when we get out of this, go on holiday locally, go and travel around our awesome country. There is way more than just the big cities. There are some beautiful places. So get out there and enjoy it.
My man, take it easy, man.
You bet you, brother.
Cheers.
My highlights, I don't know, but I've learned an awful lot about the Dakar. When I came into this as a motorsport guy, I was looking at who was going to win. I was looking at the technical differences between the Toyotas and the Peugeots, and the same on the bikes. When actually, I kind of realised that that's not what the Dakar's about. Yes, if you win, you are at the pinnacle of your discipline. You know, Sam Sunderland, incredible. He is one of the best riders in the world. There's no doubt about that. But there's so much more to the Dakar Rally about than coming here and winning. It's about the spirit of the event, the human endeavour, and going and doing something which is seemingly unachievable. And I figured that out last night, and this is the absolute truth. I was walking around the bivouac and I bumped into the team of Joey Evans. Now it's midnight at the final bivouac of the 2017 Dakar Rally, and we're waiting for Joey Evans to return. Now, believe it or not, 3 days ago, Joey spent 22 hours on the bike out on the stage. Today, his bike got run over by a car and he's repaired it in the stage from another competitor's bike who had retired and is on his way back here, and we're waiting for him. But there's so much more to Joey's story than that.
Joey Evans broke his back in a regional event 9 years ago, and he was a complete paraplegic, and he had made ramps into his house, and he was in a wheelchair, and he had some surgery to relieve the pressure off his spinal cord, and he had to learn all over again how to walk. And yeah, he got back on his motorbike again, and he said he's got this dream to come and do this Dakar Rally.
Every rider's got a story. Joey's just sticks out. You can't help to get personally attached to it, you know, and because he's such a people person, such a friendly person, you know, he just attracts everyone to him. And I think Joey's story just shows a whole different side to Dakar.
Thank you very much for making that effort, bro. You know, when you suffer a big injury, you know, like a spinal cord injury, and it's devastating, you know, you lose, you know, when you have those kind of things, often, you know, all your future dreams and all that sort of stuff goes. It's 2 in the morning, eh? When I was lying in the bed in hospital and I thought about, you know, I thought about my Dakar dream, because it was a dream before, and I thought, man, if I could still do that now, how awesome would it be? And so, to be here one day away, you know, I've got 2 hours sleep to go, and then I'm going to be riding again, and just got to finish this thing off.
Once he crosses the line tomorrow, it will be the best day in his life.
That's a fantastic story, and I felt very emotional watching that.
I don't blame you. It's incredible what Joey has done, and it really highlights the spirit of the Dakar, I think. And you'll be pleased to know he did make it to the finish ramp in Buenos Aires.
Well, I was just about to ask you, so that's great.
There you go.